Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Rohama Malik, and today I will be presenting on this idea of paying it forward on empathetic teaching. I have been teaching at Habib for the past 2 years, and I've been teaching freshman year courses for the Communication and Design Department, which I will call C&D, because we're big on acronyms in Habib. So when you think about the average freshman and their experience of coming into a university, there's a lot of things that they don't know, there's a lot of new things that they're being exposed to and having to experience for the first time. So a lot of the times, this is what their average feelings look like. They're very anxious, they're very fearful, and most of all, they're incredibly overwhelmed by being introduced to new professors, by being treated like adults for the first time in their life, thinking about courses, thinking about who they want to be for the next 4 years and after graduation for the rest of their lives. Very not stressful atmosphere that we plunge them into. So when you think about all of this that they're already going through, there's another layer that gets added when you're a C&D freshman. One of the main reasons that layer gets added is because of this course called Ideation and Processes, which is something that I've taught for the past 2 years, and is the course that helped me win this award. Ideation is a course that exposes C&D students to a lot of different materials and mediums. They're being asked to express themselves in a myriad of ways. They're being asked to use mediums that they've never even heard of before. They're going to be exposed to new ideas about art and art making and creativity. They're going to be asked to expose parts of themselves in assignments that are perhaps more personal than anything that they've ever been dealing with before. And on top of all of that, they're going to have critique sessions where a classroom of 22 other freshmen are going to judge them for their work, and also an instructor is going to stand and tell them what they did right and what they did wrong as they were on this journey to express themselves. So even though the average freshman is already feeling all of those things that I just mentioned, for C&D students, there's another layer, which is usually imposter syndrome. Because they're now in this environment where they're expected to be artistic and creative and express themselves freely and openly. And they start looking around and they start feeling like they don't know how to do that, or their art isn't good enough, or they're just not ready to be here. So that's where I tend to come in as an instructor to help them with those feelings. But then I want to share with you how I felt when I first joined, which was the same. Ideation is not a course I designed. It was something that was handed to me as, you will now teach freshmen, here is the syllabus. All of the above. And all of the above because the syllabus itself was full of a lot of technical, jargonistic design language that I did not have access to. And that ostensibly I could understand because I know how to read and understand English, but when I read those combinations of words, I was like, I don't know what's happening, much less how to teach this, or what to prepare lectures on, and how do you go about this? And so I also had a lot of imposter syndrome. One of the things that tends to surprise people in Habib and generally in my life is that I am not a trained artist. I actually went to I have an English undergrad with a minor in political science, and I'm primarily self-taught. I have an MFA in illustration, but my portfolio for my MFA programs was also just stuff that I had done for fun, that I put together as a portfolio and then submitted to grad school. And so when I think about myself feeling this way, being generally an incredibly anxious person, which is something that I explored in my MFA thesis, where I created this book on my anxiety. And it also dealt specifically with my anxiety around art making and creativity and not feeling like a real artist. And so this is an image from that thesis where these two characters, one representing my more rational side and one representing my more anxious side, are kind of disintegrating and melding together to try to become a real whole individual. So when I think about what I was going through grad school and the kind of teachers that I've had all sorts. The teacher who was directly supervising this project of mine was not perhaps the kindest. She was of the opinion that anxiety is not real and that the only thing I should be focusing on was thinking happy thoughts, which is something that she said in a final critique setting, which was a bit, you can imagine, daunting for me to hear, having spent 4 months of my life creating something that was very vulnerable and very much about exposing myself and my insecurities to a larger audience. So that was one type of pedagogy that I was exposed to. The other one was through these two individuals, Kimberly Ellen Hall and Valeska Populo. Kim was my instructor during my first year of my MFA program, and Valeska was somebody that I was a graduate teaching intern for, who taught a course on puppetry and performing objects. So I was very open about my struggles during grad school, about my imposter syndrome and not feeling like I belonged, especially because all of my peers were people who had been through 4 years of undergraduate art education. And so everything that came second nature to them was something that I was really struggling to understand. I obviously had instincts as to what I thought would look good, but I didn't know how to get there, or I didn't have the technical expertise ready to execute my vision. And so a lot of the times I would go to Kim and just have a complete meltdown, no matter what the assignment was. But through them, I was able to see what it is like to have an empathetic pedagogy and how it can actually really foster a sense of capability in one's students. And so Kim is somebody who showed me that tough love does not create good art. This is really important. There's a stereotype around art schools, both here and abroad, anywhere in the world, that you have to be strict with your students and you have to be harsh with them. If you have ever had a friend who's gone to an art school, they will tell you about a teacher who ripped up people's sketches, who got really personal in critique and was insulting people's mothers and brothers and telling them to go back to where they came from. It was bad, right? Unfortunately, that happens very often. But Kim was somebody who showed me that you could be gentle with somebody and firm and put them on the right track and still help them create good art. You didn't have to tear them down in order for them to do that. Valeska is somebody who taught me that teaching could be a way to practice being human. I have a pedagogical teaching certification from my grad school, and part of that process was to interview one of the people you were interning for. And so when I interned for Valeska and interviewed her, this is something that she said, and I found it in my notes when I was preparing this talk, and I thought it was a really lovely phrase to think about being better teachers, but also being better humans as a result, because empathy is a vehicle to connect with other people around you. And so, thinking about these people who really supported me on my journey, I started thinking about what I could do in my classroom settings. So some of the things that I do with my students is that I listen to them. This sounds really obvious, but you have to be secure enough in your own knowledge and secure enough in creating a safe space in the classroom so that the students can come to you with all of their grievances, their complaints about the course. Again, ideation, if I couldn't figure it out as an instructor, the students had even less success with the syllabus. And so there was a lot of pushback, especially the first year, of like, why are we even doing this? What are these terms? What is the point? You can't take it personally. You have to be able to sit with them, see them, look at them eye to eye and be like, yeah, I am also struggling with this. Let's figure it out together. You have to allow them to freak out. This is really important. It's also, again, a way for me to kind of honor how I was taught, which is that you create that space for your students to cry, for them to yell, for them to come to you with their imposter syndrome, to feel like they can't do anything that they've set out to do. And kind of, again, just make them feel like they are actually able to do it, which comes after the tears and after the processing, but is very much, again, an inevitable thing if you create that space. One of the main things that I always stress to my students is that the work is paramount. You have to show up for yourselves, you have to show up for your classmates. If you have not done the work, you aren't excused from critique. You have to show up for the other people. You have to respect the fact that they put in their time. You have to put in time and respect yourself as well by doing the work. The reason I said the work is paramount is because when you start talking about things like feelings in a classroom setting and empathy and all of these sorts of things that we do know about, there can be a sense that feelings in a classroom are kind of woo-woo, which is a phrase that I borrowed from a friend, which I really love every time she talks about like astronomy or things that are really like sometimes very philosophical. She'd be like, I know I'm doing something that's very woo-woo. So I borrow this from her. There might be some of you in this audience who feel that all of the stuff I'm saying is woo-woo, and that's fine. I definitely know that I've come across people who feel like they have to be strict with their students, even if they're not strict people in real life, because the idea is that the real world out there will not be kind to our students. It's not going to coddle them or make them feel good about themselves. And so the classroom can then be an avenue for them to be exposed to that kind of behavior and help them toughen up. And I understand that approach. But speaking as somebody who does not respond well to that approach at all, it's not something that I would like to bring into a classroom. And what I found actually is that when you lead with empathy and when you try to connect with your students as to where they're at, what ends up happening is actually by the end of the semester, my students are feeling capable, they're feeling happy, and they're feeling really confident. It doesn't matter if their technical skills haven't gone from like a 0 to 100. They might be solidly in the 30s and 40s as far as their artistic journey goes, and that's okay. But what they feel like they're able to do is stand in front of a room full of their peers and feel supported by them, by the instructor, and that they can express themselves better. And by the end of the semester, especially with a course like Ideation, they feel that, okay, again, the technical skills may not be there, but I have time to learn them. But the other things that come through just experience is stuff that they're being exposed to, and then they start absorbing then. And so experience starts to trump imposter syndrome. It never goes away fully. It feels weird for me to be standing here being like, I have a talk on pedagogy. I've only been teaching properly for 2.5 years. So it will always be there, but it can start to fade into the background. It happens with my students, it happens with me as well, because the second time I taught this course, I was so much more confident. It's a very obvious thing, but I've been through the motions, and because I had been through the motions in the first semester, I was able to support my students much better in the second time around that I taught it as well. And so this is why I want to kind of espouse leading with empathy and creating that environment in a classroom where people are able to, again, just express and support themselves. And what I'm hoping that you get through this talk is that you remember people who made you feel supported in a classroom setting, and I hope that for the students here, and generally any that I encounter in my courses, I hope that you will all learn to pay it forward. Thank you.